This is Big Podcast.
You've heard me mention this on the podcast before. My wife is a photographer, and she works with a lot of people who are doing reality television. They are influencers. They've got brands. They've got endorsements. And it is always interesting to me to hear some of the teams that are up here. And I say up here, she would be right outside my office here, right outside the studio if she were shooting. And they bring in these teams, hair, makeup, stylist, company rep, and then the talent themselves. It's always interesting to hear the amount of money that comes through these people for a single social media post, for an endorsement, for whatever, an appearance. It's a lot of money. I'm going to talk about that, how it relates to podcasting. This is Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. If you want to grow your podcast, make more money with your podcast, have a podcast that attracts people, attracts sponsors, that matters, that people miss if it's gone, this is the podcast for you. BigPodcast.com is the website. My name is David Hooper. This episode, the audio edition of my weekly newsletter, that goes out every Friday morning, New York City time. You can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 219. Here's what I'm going to talk about. Blame the influencers. Maybe we should phrase that as a question. Blame the influencers? We'll dive deeper into that. Never play it safe. 7 levers to unlock your creative potential. Echo Glow. Should I do that twice? Echo Glow. Little podcast humor for you. Relationship advice, part 1. This episode of Build a Big Podcast is brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing at the highest quality possible, accessible to anyone. You want to look and sound your best? That's because you and your guest and your co-host, you're going to be recorded locally by Riverside, meaning you're going to bypass poor or unstable internet connections. You're going to get studio quality audio and video. Once you get that audio and video, editing is easy. You're going to get a transcript powered by AI. It's got 99% accuracy. You're going to have automated social media clips that you can use to promote your podcast. Maybe, if you're an influencer, get money for those clips. Automated silence and filler word removal. The thing I'm really excited about right now, live streaming and audience interaction. That's one of the things that podcasting has missed for years, but it is now available via Riverside.fm. You can record your podcast live, stream it as you're recording. If you want to talk to your audience, do a call-in show, you can do it through Riverside.fm. You can try it for free right now. Go to Riverside.fm, get an account. They'll give you a couple of hours to check out everything that I'm talking about, the magic clips, the AI editing, the live streaming and audience interaction. You're going to be able to use it all free of charge. It's enough time for you to do an interview, maybe 2 interviews. If you want to stick around, I've got a discount code for you. That discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. Use it, see what you like. If you want to stick around in the paid plan, use the discount code for 15% off. The discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. Hey, you know how it works. I'm going from thing to thing to thing. In between those things, you're going to hear this sound. That's how you know I'm going to the next thing. That's how you know. If you want more information, you want the links, go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 219. Ready? Blame the influencers. Or as I said, should it be a question? Blame the influencers? This is something I've noticed for the last couple of years. The new people that are coming into podcasting without even having published their first episode, they're asking, how much is my check? Well, not really. Some of these new people don't know what a check is, but they want to be paid, basically. And I blame the influencers. We've got a lot of young people. They have grown up with phones. They've grown up with YouTube. They've grown up with influencers. That wasn't even a word. In fact, quick side note, you may remember this. I had a podcast called Red, the marketing podcast for experts. However, it was originally called the marketing podcast for influencers because influencers, to me, these change agents in entrepreneurship, these change agents with a message, somebody that was trying to do something, feed the world, talk about social issues, something where they are having influence on people to change minds or to change something, do something that wasn't being done. Then you have people like Kim Kardashian, they hijacked it. Influencers for a lot of people, that means I'm going to get on social media and I'm going to shill for something. I've got merch, fragrances, energy drinks. That's what people consider to be influencers. And there is a lot of money in the influencer business. Part of that we're seeing right now is due to things like FanDuel, gambling. And you've got these young people that are watching this, and you see these influencers, they come and go all the time, and it happens very quickly. One day, nobody knows who you are. Then everybody knows who you are, at least in internet circles. Then the next day, well, hopefully people know who you are. You've got people that they don't see the behind the scenes, the come up that usually has to happen for somebody to actually build an audience and have influence over people. There's different variations of this saying. Every overnight sensation takes 5 years, 7 years, whatever. People talk about a 7-year career on average for the entertainment industry. And that's usually, let's say, 3 years up, 1 year on top, 3 years, kind of fizzling down. But that's being scoped. That could be something takes off instantly. You've got a good week or two, and then you're done. Somebody else replaces you. Regardless, you've got a lot of people that think fame and fortune, the money that they can make, is instant, and they don't see the behind the scenes of stuff. You know my company's Big Podcast. This podcast, Build a Big Podcast. That's related. But the official name of my company is actually 23 Hours. And I got that phrase from a guy named Tom Johnston. He's the singer of the Doobie Brothers. These guys have been around 50, 60 years. They've been through the studio, 3 times. In their 70s now. I was talking to him about it once. I said, man, you guys are still on that bike. And he said, yeah. Because when you hire the Doobie Brothers, you're not paying us for the hour we're on stage. You are paying us for the 23 hours it takes to get there. That's a common show business phrase. He did not make that up. He's talking about travel time on the bus, plane, whatever the Doobies are doing these days. But what he's also talking about, for most people, not necessarily for an instant overnight success, and that literally exists these days, he is talking about the days, the weeks, the months, the years that it takes to have something that people are interested in. Let's go back to this. How much is my check? What a lot of these new podcasters are thinking about. The first thing that new podcasters, influencers definitely are asking, how much is my check? How much do I get paid? For most people, especially if you've never released an episode before, nothing. And I'm not saying you shouldn't get paid. I'm for fair payment. And you cannot deposit exposure. I realize that. However, don't get over your skis, man. Think about that secondary payment. Let's think about long-term careers. Hawk Tua, where is she? Hiding out. I think it was James Cridlin was talking about her. Her last episode was about how to avoid getting canceled. And what ended up happening with that, it's a crypto thing. Look, I'm not getting into it. Just saw some of the headlines. Heard a little bit of tape on it. And apparently she's canceled herself. She was not into this, whatever this is. She had a good run. Overnight sensation, literally. She's everywhere within a couple weeks. Made her money. She stuck around a little bit longer than most, maybe 3 or 4 months. Then got over her skis. How much is my check? Got in with some people that she shouldn't have gotten in with, doing some things that she probably didn't understand. She didn't understand the business. And that's the kind of thing that you learned during those 23 hours, those days, weeks, and months of building your career. So don't be too quick to want that success, and don't be too quick to want that instant payment. When you start taking money from people, that is when people start wanting something from you. And if you want to see a lot of failures from people who are taking their money too early, go look at Patreon. Go look at these guys who are doing advanced orders of books that they never deliver on. It could be $7, $10, whatever. Hey, I'm doing advanced orders. If you don't deliver on that, people start to get pissed. If you want more thoughts on this, I've got them. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 219. Real quick, let's talk about Big Podcast Amp. Speaking of money, if you like the newsletter, you're going to love Big Podcast Amp. This is the audio monetization program. That's what it stands for. It's a personal coaching program. It's going to be me working with you. We're going to help you do 3 things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. And 3, make more money with your podcast and your podcasting skills. I have mentioned this before. AI is huge right now. There's a huge opportunity for podcasters. Anybody who can record a voice, your voice or other people's voices. They are paying a lot of money for that. If you're a voice actor, you can be happy or you can be sad. Any kind of emotion. That's what they're trying to crack with AI right now. It's great with words, but can it do emotion in spoken word? Of course, I work with more than just AI opportunities. I'm saying that that's one of them. If you want the details of what I can do for you, this is where to go. Bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. Never play it safe. 7 levers to unlock your creative potential. I've got a sign on my wall. It says, playing it safe will always end in disaster. This is an article that I've got linked. You will find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 219. It's by Chase Jarvis. He talks about a few things, 7 levers. One of them, creativity thrives under constraints. He says, whether it's limited resources or intentionally setting boundaries, limitations force you to innovate. Constraints are not obstacles, but opportunities to think differently and find solutions you wouldn't have considered otherwise. He's got something he calls the 7-minute creative challenge. Let me tell you how it works, because it's going to be great for you if you're thinking, I don't know what I should podcast about. Maybe I should think of some new segments for the podcast, some new ways for me to market myself. This is the setup. It's an old school brainstorm, 4 steps. 1, set a timer. 7 minutes, that's his time. This will create a sense of urgency and encourage rapid thinking. Second thing, choose a topic or theme. Decide on a general area or theme related to your podcast. It could be something broad. Let's say technology. My podcast is about technology, or I want to do a podcast about technology, something broad like that. Or it could be something more specific. Maybe you're doing a series, healthy living tips for busy professionals. Things to do within your niche for the new year to make this year better than last year. It could be as specific as you want. Then the third thing you're going to do, you're going to push the start button on that timer. You've got 7 minutes. Write down as many ideas as possible. Don't worry about how feasible or polished they are. Get them on paper. It could be bring in Oprah for the episode. We're not making judgments here. And that's the fourth thing. All ideas, no matter how wild or unconventional, make it to the list. That openness leads to unique angles that you might not have initially considered. Do not edit yourself during these 7 minutes. Afterwards, you're going to review and refine. I mentioned Oprah. Say, well, I can't get Oprah, but maybe we could use Oprah as an example and say 5 things that Oprah did to blank. Get healthy. 5 things Oprah did to build her hosting skills. Did you know Oprah was the weather woman where I am in Nashville? Also, working a small station here, WVOL, as a reporter. So that's a couple things that she did. Before she was Oprah on TV, she was the weather girl on TV. And before she was the weather girl, she was a reporter at WVOL in Nashville. You do the other 3. Set your timer and go for it. Let me give you another example of how this might work. Let's say your podcast is about personal finance. What would a brainstorm session look like? Interview with a financial advisor. Interview with a financial advisor about planning for retirement. Tips for saving money on groceries. Listener stories. Listener call-ins. Use that Riverside.fm feature. Discussions on cryptocurrency. How to budget effectively. Book reviews, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The Millionaire Next Door. The psychology about spending habits. The psychology of sales. Ways to teach kids about money. What you can learn about money from your kids. Flip it. An episode on side hustles. Interviews with people who do side hustles. Those are fascinating. People love stories. And for something like that, the more boring, the better. I was working at a station in town. I was doing some production. This was so interesting. I'm talking to one of the producers. We're just outside. And a dude comes up and he says, hey, you work here at the station? She said, yeah. This guy painted the lines in parking lots. He said, yeah, I was driving by doing some work in the area, which they all say, but he may have been. And he said, notice your lines are a little bit faded. Doesn't cost much money to get new lines. And she said, all right, cool. Give me your card and I'll give it to the facilities manager. And she did. There you go. That's an interesting story. Strangely enough, I was working on a local show. I said, that would be a pretty cool story. Talking about guys who are out here hustling like this. Boring jobs that Nashvillians are doing that make a lot of money. I don't know if he wanted us to get in his pocketbook, but you can certainly do that with your podcast. Anyway, you see how the exercise works. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes the crazier the ideas, the more fun the episode is. You want more thoughts on this? You want the list of those steps? Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 219. The Echo Glow. This is going to sound like a product pitch, and it is not. But I was talking to my buddy Dan Hughley from Focusrite. He said, my office that I work in, home office, is also my recording studio. And one of the things that I do when I want to go from day work, working at Focusrite, to my recording studio, recording music, and for you, it could be recording your podcast. I switch the lights. I've got these LED lights and then go from standard daylight, white light, whatever you want to call it. I change the color. It sets the mood for me to do my creative work, my studio work. And I thought, man, that would be a really good idea for podcasting. If you've got a podcast studio like that, or if you're doing video, imagine this. You change the lighting when there's a different segment. Speed round, interviews, monologues, whatever. You can change the lighting and it just changes things up. It makes things visually interesting for the videos that you're doing or gets you into the mood emotionally. And the Echo Glow, if you've seen Amazon Alexa, or they call it Echo now, this is why I thought it'd be interesting for podcasting, because you can actually set it with your voice. All right, Alexa, set the glow for yellow. We're going to go for 30 seconds. Go, speed round. You've got that visual element for you, for your guest. If you're doing video, for the audience that's watching. Color changing timers, great for quiz segments. I mean, this is the kind of thing, if somebody gets the wrong answer, you switch it over to red. You can have fun with this. I think it's like $30 or something. I've got a link to it. The Echo Glow multicolor smart lamp. It's a fun tool. For just a few bucks, you're going to stand out just a little bit more than you would otherwise. If you want to see the picture of it, get more information, get a link to it. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 219. Relationship advice part 1. Valentine's Day, just a few days away. And I'm going to kick things off a little bit early with some relationship advice for you. You want more ratings and reviews? Some podcasters, no, we're good. But look, we all appreciate more ratings and reviews. Let me tell you what not to do, something that's not very effective. Putting it at the very end of your podcast. Hey, you like the podcast? Leave us a rating. Leave us a review. This will help people find us. No. Podcast listeners are immune to that. We've heard it a bajillion times. A one-on-one conversation is so much more effective. I could have 1,000 people listening to this right now. Hey, you like it? Leave her a rating. Leave her a review. Those 1,000 people are going to ignore it. It's much more effective when you're having a conversation with somebody who likes the podcast. Then you say, really? Thanks, man. Would you mind going on Apple Podcasts and leaving a review for me? That'd really help me build up my social proof. A one-on-one ask, usually much more effective than the hundreds and hundreds of people hearing that random message that you're sending out. Hey, leave a rating, leave a review. That's not effective. So this is the way that it works. Somebody says something nice about your podcast and you follow up with a request. This can be done via email, social media, that one-on-one conversation you're having. Just say, hey, thanks for your comments. Would you mind making that a review, posting it on Apple Podcasts? That'll help other people see what we're doing. Done. Then show people how to do it. You can make a video. This is how to do it on your phone. This is how to do it on the computer. If it's in person, you can show people how to do it. Click here, then this, and this, and this. People will do it. I mean, don't be over the top about it. Feel people out, but do ask. Do ask and make a habit of asking. Not necessarily to everybody listening to your podcast, but when somebody says something nice about you, reply with, hey, would you mind doing that? Most people are going to say, yeah. Will they actually do it? I don't know. Again, it sounds counterintuitive, but talking to fewer people in this way, much more effective than talking to everybody in your podcast. Hey, while we're on the subject, I'm not listening to my own advice. If you like the podcast, I would appreciate you going to Apple Podcast and leaving a review for this podcast, Build a Big Podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want the newsletter, you know where it is. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. By the way, related to leaving reviews and ratings of your podcast, I've got a funny joke about this. You will find it. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 219. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program, I've got everything you need at bigpodcast.com. I make it so easy for you to subscribe. One for Android, one for iPhone, one is an RSS feed. However you get your podcast, I'm going to get this one to you with just one click. Everything's at bigpodcast.com. Again, I appreciate you spending time with me. I'll be back in a few days with another episode. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, go to bigpodcast.com and subscribe. Thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast. I'll see you on the next one.